In this lecture, we're going to go over parabolas in vertex form. So the first thing is, let's go over vertex form first. So vertex forms always look something like this. So we're going to have it as y equals 2x minus 3 squared plus 5. Okay. So step one is that in vertex form, we're pretty much finding the vertex. So I know for x, it's always going to be this value right here inside the squared, inside the x, but it's always going to be the opposite value. So instead of being -3, the x is going to be +3. And I know the y will always be the one at the end, which is +5, and we leave it as +5. The slope is always going to be on the very left, and so my a equals 2, which is going to be the slope. So how do I graph this? Well, I know my x is +3, and then my y is +5. So it would be 3, 5, which is the vertex would be right there. And then my next point, my slope is 2, so I go up 2 and then right 1. So it would be right there and then right there. And then to simply graph it, it looks something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and do another example. I'm going to go ahead and erase it. So my next example, I'm going to make it look like the slope going the opposite direction. Instead of opening up, we're going to open down. So let's take a look at how that looks. So it's going to be y equals -2, x plus 3 minus 2. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to figure out the x first. And remember the x is going to be over here. And it's always going to be the opposite. So my x is -3. My y is always going to be over here. And I keep the sign the same. It doesn't flip or change. And I know my slope, so my a, is going to be over here. And it's going to be -2. So the vertex is going to be -3. My y is going to be -2, which is over here. And then from here, what I'm going to do next is my slope is -2. So I'm going to go right 1, down 2, which is over here. And then my next one is left 1, down 2, which is over here. And then I'm going to graph it so that it looks something like this. So it's going to go down. So if you look at your slope as a negative, then you know it's going to go down. If you look at your slope and it's positive, you know it's going to go up. Okay, so the next one is the parabola form, and it always looks something like this. So it's like y equals, x plus 3, or x minus 2. And pretty much what it's saying is that it's going to give you the two x-intercepts. So it looks something like this. So we know the x is going to equal -3. Anytime we have it in this format, it's always going to be the opposite sign. My other x equals 2. So it'd be -3. And then it's going to be +2 over here. So this one I'm just going to make up. So it's going to be something kind of like this. And on the SAT, if you see in this format, they're just wanting you to figure out the zeros, and that's usually what it is most of the time. So I'm going to give you one more example. I'm going to go ahead and erase it. Sometimes they give it to you like, two, kind of like in that format with 2 of them, but sometimes they might give it to you in 3. So it looks like something like this. Y equals x minus 2, x plus 3, x minus 1. And the only thing that you really need to know is that pretty much it crosses the x at 2, crosses the x at -3, crosses the x at 1. So we know that it's going to cross here once. It's going to cross here once at -3. It's going to cross here at +1 once. And that's pretty much what you need to know. It's going to look something like this. And let's go ahead and look at some problems so that it all comes together. So if we look at the first one, it says the x-intercepts is at -3, -1, and +1. And so, kind of like the example from before, we know it's going to be y equals, it's going to cross -3. So for this, it's always going to be the opposite. So it's going to be x plus 3. It's going to be the opposite of -1 is going to be x plus 1. And then the opposite of 1 is going to be x minus 1. And the only answer choice that looks like that would be C. Alright, so for this one, we can see that it's in vertex form, because look at all our answer choices. It's all in vertex form. So first, I want to identify my vertex. So I know my vertex, my x, would be 3, my y would be 1, and then my slope is, I look at my vertex, which is here, I look at my next point, which is here. I notice that I go up 1, or I go up, 4, and I go over 1. And I look at the opposite just to double check. So I go from 1 to 5. So I know I go up 4, and then I go left 1. So I know my slope is 4. So from here, I just go ahead and write it out. So I know it's going to be y equals, my slope is 4. Then I'm going to do x, and I always go the opposite. So I know my x is positive 3. So it's going to be -3 over here, squared. And then my y is just going to be +1. Nothing at the y's change. So is there an answer choice like that? The answer would be A. Alright, so with this one, there's a lot of words. This one looks pretty tricky. So the way to attack this one is, this is what is the value of k? I see my k is over here. And I see my k over here. So I know my k, essentially what it's asking for is like, what is my x? You know, instead of using x, they use k. It's just there to kind of trick you. And I know k is a positive value. And what I really care about, which equation I really care about, is actually this one. Because I know this one is kind of like the positive one. And so I kind of go from there. So what I notice about the k is at 0. And so if k is at 0, I know my y also equals 0. Because I just look at this one, this is y is 0. And then from here, I just plug in the value. Anytime that I want to figure out the x-intercept, I make my y 0. So looking at this formula, I can just do 0 equals 8x squared minus 2. From here, I can do plus 2 plus 2. So 2 equals 8x squared. From here, we're going to divide by 8, divide by 8. And I'm going to reduce it, so it's 8 squared equals 1 over 4. And to get x by itself, I'm going to square root. And when I square root this, what it actually looks like is square root of 1 divided by square root of 4. So these two things right now are actually the same. I just rewrote it so it's easier on my eyes. So the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. So the answer would be 1/2, which is B.